Hi, this is the Business Guy. Let's talk about what you can do to protect your assets from lawsuits. I mean, if you've worked hard to accumulate wealth and want to protect it from creditors, lawsuits, and other threats, you may be wondering what your options are. So in this video, we'll compare LLCs, domestic asset protection trusts, and offshore asset protection trusts, and talk about which one offers the most benefits. And if you appreciate this information, please click the like button. It would really help me out a lot so YouTube promotes this video. And also please subscribe if you haven't so you'll be up to date when new videos like this come out. So who am I to talk about this? I'm the CEO of Asset Protection Planners, the nation's largest asset protection firm. And if you're serious about protecting your assets, feel free to reach out at assetprotectionplanners.com. First, let's define what an asset protection trust is. An asset protection trust is a legal arrangement that allows you to transfer your assets to a trust, and the trustee manages the trust for your benefit and the benefit of your beneficiaries, which can also be you. The main purpose of an asset protection trust is to shield your assets from creditors, lawsuits, divorce, bankruptcy, and other risks that could jeopardize your wealth. Now, we typically stick an LLC inside of the trust that holds the bank account and/or stock brokerage account for you. You're usually the manager of the LLC initially and the signatory in the bank accounts. So if you need the trustee to step in to protect you, they simply step in as LLC manager. And again, the LLC is inside of the trust, so when the courts tell you to turn over the money, the trustee can refuse to comply. Now, there are two types of asset protection trusts. There's domestic trusts and offshore trusts. A domestic asset protection trust is a trust that's formed in the U.S. under U.S. laws and has one or more U.S. trustees. A domestic asset protection trust can be established in any of the states that allow such trusts. I think there's about 17 states that offer those laws now, such as Nevada, Delaware, Alaska, and others. Now, a domestic asset protection trust might be a little bit cheaper to set up, but it also has some major drawbacks. An offshore asset protection trust is a trust that's formed under the laws of a foreign country, such as the Cook Islands, Nevis, or Belize. An offshore asset protection trust has a foreign trustee company, which in our case is our law firm Offshore, who is not subject to U.S. laws or courts. An offshore asset protection trust can be a little more expensive to set up than a domestic trust, but it also has some major advantages. So what are the pros and cons of each type of trust? Let's go ahead and start with the domestic asset protection trust. The main benefit of a domestic trust is that it might be a little more convenient and less costly than an offshore trust. You don't have to deal with the foreign laws, regulations, and reporting requirements. You might be able to access your assets a day or two earlier by wire transfer than with an offshore trust. However, a domestic trust also has some huge limitations and risks, and the biggest drawback of a domestic trust is that it does not offer complete protection from U.S. creditors or courts. A domestic trust is still subject to U.S. laws and jurisdiction, which means that a U.S. judge can order you or your trustee to turn over your assets to satisfy a claim against you. So a domestic trust also has to comply with state-specific regulations, which may vary in terms of how effective they are in protecting your assets. For example, some states have shorter statutes of limitation periods than others, which means that the creditors have less time to challenge your transfer of assets into the trust. And some states also have exceptions for certain types of creditors, such as spouses, children, or the IRS. And another drawback of a domestic trust is that it may not be recognized or respected in other states. So say you live in a state that has asset protection trust laws and you move to another state or face a lawsuit in another jurisdiction. Your domestic trust may not be valid or enforceable there. And we see that a lot, for example, in California, Florida, New York, Texas, where they don't have domestic asset protection trust laws. And somebody gets into the courtroom there and the judge is going to apply the law in that state. They say, listen, I don't care if you have this trust over in Nevada. You live here, your assets are here, you need to turn them over, and that trustee needs to hand them over, or we're going to hold that trustee in contempt. And if the trustee is going to turn over his own assets or yours, or has to sit in the clink for a while, well, you know what's going to happen. They're going to turn it over. And that's where the offshore trust does not have this drawback, because the U.S. courts do not have jurisdiction over our offshore trustee law firm. So the domestic trust, because of this weakness, could expose your assets to creditors or courts that do not honor your trust. And we see that all the time. We look at the case law. Now let's look at the offshore asset protection trust. The main benefit of an offshore trust is that it offers superior protection from U.S. creditors or courts. An offshore trust is governed by the laws of a foreign country, where it's established, which are usually more favorable and flexible than U.S. laws when it comes to asset protection. An offshore trustee, as we said, is not bound by U.S. laws or court orders, which means that the trustee company can refuse to comply with any demands from U.S. creditors or courts to surrender your assets. And what we've seen is every single time we've put assets in an offshore trust in an international institution in the proper place, we've never seen a client lose money. In fact, I've personally drafted more Cook Islands trusts than anybody on the planet. And on top of that, an offshore trustee can move your assets or the trust jurisdiction to another jurisdiction if necessary to avoid any threats. Now, another benefit of an offshore trust is that it creates a significant deterrent for potential creditors or litigants. In fact, we just had a guy call today. I just thought about this, one of our representatives, and they said, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a call that just came in like maybe a couple hours ago, and they said, thank you. I want to thank you so much. Every single thing that you said was going to happen happened. You bound the assets, you tied everything up, and what my opponent did is they just settled for the insurance money because they couldn't get anything else. Everything was tied up in this trust, and they couldn't touch it, so they just settled. Because an offshore trust is located in a foreign country with laws written to protect you, you as the trust settler and beneficiary, it is much more costly and difficult for them to pursue a claim against you or your trust. They have to hire foreign lawyers, travel to a foreign country where they're not very friendly to people suing other people, and prove their case under a different legal system. In the Cook Islands and Nevis, for example, your opponents would have to prove their cases beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a very difficult legal hurdle indeed. Plus, they only have a small amount of time to bring their action in the foreign court. So number one, they're going to lose even if they bring the action quickly within the statute of limitations period. They're still going to lose. But if they bring it after the statute of limitations period, the courts won't even hear the case. They'll turn it down. So again, Cook Islands and Nevis protect assets right away. So the statute of limitations in those two jurisdictions, it doesn't say that your assets are protected until the clock is ticked the requisite time. What it says is the assets are protected immediately, but the courts won't even hear the cases after that time. See the difference? Most creditors would rather settle for less or give up altogether than go through an expensive and time-consuming hassle that they're most likely going to lose. I mean, look at the case law. And another benefit of an offshore trust is that you may also be able to access more diverse investment options that are not available in the U.S. I mean, I love the investments I can get into in my Cook Islands Trust. I've experienced incredible returns with the ETFs and other investments. Okay, are there any disadvantages with the offshore trust? Let's talk about that. One disadvantage is that an offshore trust might be a little more expensive to set up and maintain than a domestic trust. You'll also need to comply with various reporting and disclosure requirements such as the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act and the Common Reporting Standard, which aims to prevent tax evasion and money laundering, which is fine because U.S. accounts have these things automatically built in anyway. So this is just an extra form or two you have to file because the offshore banks report less than the U.S. banks. Okay, so how does an LLC compare to an asset protection trust? An LLC, or limited liability company, is a business entity that combines the features of a corporation and a partnership. And an LLC provides its owners or members with limited liability protection from the debts and obligations of the business. An LLC also offers flexibility and simplicity in terms of management, taxation, and ownership. You can go ahead and watch the video on how LLCs are taxed. It's a great video. They're taxed in 4 different ways. So take a look at that, how LLCs are taxed. You can see that on my channel. An LLC can be used as an asset protection vehicle by holding your assets in separate LLCs that are insulated from each other and from personal creditors. For example, you can create an LLC for each of your rental properties so that if one of your properties faces a lawsuit or a foreclosure, it does not affect all your other properties or personal assets. You can also create an LLC for your personal assets, such as your bank accounts, stocks, bonds, etc., so they're protected from your business creditors. And then there are also provisions in most LLC statutes such that when somebody sues you personally, the LLC has charging order protection. This makes it more difficult for somebody to seize your membership interest in an LLC or anything inside of the LLC. Now, in most states, you'll need 2 or more members to enjoy this type of protection. Now, in the states of Nevada, Wyoming, Delaware, Alaska, and North Dakota, you can have single member charging order protection. The problem is there are a lot of results-oriented judges out there who we have seen penetrate domestic LLCs and allow their seizure regardless of what the law says. In other words, if it's in the judge's reach, he or she can grab it. The LLC has even more limitations and risks when it comes to asset protection. So another major drawback of an LLC is that it does not protect you from personal liability for your own actions or negligence. For example, if you cause a car accident or commit a fraud, you cannot hide behind your LLC to avoid paying damages or facing criminal charges. You're personally responsible liable for your own conduct regardless of whether you act as an individual or as a member of an LLC. Another drawback of an LLC is that it may not offer sufficient protection from creditors who can pierce the corporate veil, or LLC veil in this case. And this is a legal term that refers to a situation where a creditor can prove that an LLC is not a separate entity from its owner, but rather an alter ego or a sham. Now, there are fewer formality requirements with an LLC, but still we've seen judges pierce them if they're not operated quickly. And this can happen if the owner fails to follow proper formalities, such as keeping separate books and records and maintaining adequate capitalization, as well as holding regular meetings and signing contracts in the name of the LLC. Though, as we said, it's more important with corporations. Even with LLCs, we've seen that if a creditor can show that the owner treated the LLC as his or her own personal property rather than as a distinct legal entity, the court may pierce the corporate veil and hold the owner liable for the LLC's debts. So how can you avoid piercing the corporate veil and protect your personal assets? Here's some of the basic practices to follow. 1. Choose a reputable and reliable jurisdiction for your trust or LLC, whether domestic or offshore. Make sure you understand and comply with its laws and regulations. Hire professional advisors such as lawyers, accountants, and trustees who can help you set up and maintain your trust properly. And by goodness gracious, avoid DIY or online services that may not provide adequate guidance or support. Transfer your assets to your trust before you face lawsuits or claims. And don't wait until you're in trouble to create your trust. Now, it's okay if you create your trust after, if that's all you can do, but it's best to act as early as possible. Doing so on the last minute could be seen as malicious by the courts and creditors. But still, an offshore trust is one of the only ways we've seen that actually works to protect assets after you've been sued. Next, keep your LLC assets separate from your personal assets. Don't use your LLC account to pay your personal bills or vice versa. Don't commingle your LLC assets with other assets that are not part of the LLC. Follow the terms of your trust and your LLC operating agreement and respect the role of your trustee, your management position, and so on. And don't interfere or influence your trustee's decisions or actions, and don't try to revoke or amend your trust without the proper legal advice. Keep accurate and complete records of your trust and LLC transactions and activities. Document everything that happens in your trusts and LLCs, such as transfers, distributions, investments, etc., and file any required reports or disclosures with the relevant authorities. Next, choose a reputable and reliable jurisdiction for your LLC, whether domestic or offshore. Make sure you understand and comply with its laws and regulations. Our favorite jurisdiction for LLCs to provide asset protection is the Caribbean island of Nevis. In fact, we've set up more LLCs there than anybody in the world. So hire professional advisors such as lawyers, accountants, and managers who can help you set up and operate your LLC properly. Again, you can call us. That's what we do. We set up the LLCs. Next, you'll want to capitalize your LLC adequately and do not take out excessive loans or distributions. Make sure your LLC has enough funds to carry out its normal business functions and meet its reasonably anticipated obligations. In fact, that's what we do. We help people set up accounts for their LLCs. Keep your LLC assets separate from your personal assets and do not use your LLCs to pay your personal bills or vice versa. Do not commingle your LLC assets with other assets that are not part of the LLC. So follow the formalities of running your LLC, such as keeping separate books and records, maintaining adequate insurance, holding regular meetings, and signing contracts in the name of the LLC. You typically don't have to have insurance for a Nevis LLC, but a domestic one, if it owns real estate, you want to have insurance for it. Keep accurate and complete records of your LLC transactions and activities, and document everything that happens in your LLC, such as sales, purchases, profits, losses, taxes, etc. File any required reports or disclosures with the relevant authorities. So in conclusion, an offshore asset protection trust provides better asset protection from lawsuits than does an LLC or a domestic trust. An offshore trust creates a legal barrier between you and your assets that is difficult to breach by U.S. courts or creditors. Now, the reference we just made right there to an LLC, we're talking about U.S. LLCs. But we do, whenever we set up an offshore trust, we set up an offshore LLC, which has stronger asset protection. We stick that inside the trust so that you have something to control while the waters are calm, and the LLC gives you something where the trustee law firm can easily step in as manager of that LLC so they can protect you quickly. And again, the offshore trust costs a little bit more than the domestic trust, and it's quite a bit more than a U.S. LLC, but you get what you pay for. You will need to hire professional advisors who can help you navigate the laws and regulations of both a U.S. and foreign country where you establish your trust. So you can feel free to call us if you're serious and you have questions, because we can help you. You'll also need to comply with various various reporting and disclosure requirements that aim to prevent tax evasion and money laundering. An LLC can also be used as an asset protection vehicle by holding your assets in separate LLCs that are insulated from each other and from your personal creditors. However, an LLC does not protect you from personal liability from your own actions or negligence. So we're summarizing what we just talked about. An LLC does not offer sufficient protection from creditors who can pierce the corporate veil if they can prove that you treated the LLC as your personal property rather than a distinct legal entity. Therefore, if you want to protect your assets from lawsuits in the most effective way possible, you should consider setting up an offshore asset protection trust with an offshore LLC inside in a reputable and reliable jurisdiction that has favorable laws and regulations for trust and LLC formation and operation. You'll also need to hire professional advisors who can help you with legal and financial and administrative aspects of creating and maintaining your trust. You also need to transfer your assets into the trust before you face lawsuits as best. You can transfer them after, but as early as possible is best, and keep your trust assets separate from your personal assets. So how do you set up an offshore trust? Here are the steps to follow. 1, we help you review and appoint a professional trustee who's established outside of your home country. The trustee is the company or law firm that will manage your trust and help you carry out your instructions. We have trustees with experience and expertise in offshore trust administration, as well as good reputations and track records that we've used for decades to manage billions and billions of our clients' dollars. You should also establish a clear and transparent relationship, communicate your goals and expectations. You may want to review and appoint a protector who's also established outside of your home country. The protector is an optional but recommended person or entity that will oversee and supervise the trustee. Your protector can have the power to remove or replace the trustee, approve or veto certain trust actions, or amend the trust document. You should choose a protector that you trust and respect and who shares your vision and values. Draft and solidify your foreign trust document. The trust document is the legal agreement that defines the terms and conditions of your trust, and it should include the names of the grantor, trustee, protector, beneficiaries, and any other parties involved. It should also specify the purpose, duration, and distribution rules, investment guidelines, dispute resolution mechanisms, and other provisions of your trust, such as the trust that we provide. You should work with a qualified and professional organization that can put the trust together for you that meets your needs and objectives. And finally, you want to fund the trust by transferring domestic assets into the offshore accounts. The final step is to transfer your assets from your home country to your offshore trust accounts, and this can include cash, stock, bonds, or other types of liquid assets that you want to protect. In fact, we have accountants and tax advisors so that you can properly report and declare these transfers to avoid any tax penalties. So by following these steps, you can set up an offshore asset protection trust that will give you the strongest asset protection available with far superior benefits to a domestic LLC or domestic trust. So thank you for watching this video on asset protection from lawsuits. Hope you found it informative and helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call, 1-954-400-1050. You can also visit us at assetprotectionplanners.com. Fill out a free strategy session form. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. And we'll see you next time. This is The Business Guy.